and welcome to reading number 24 of Live Well, Die Holy. Live well, and I might add happily, die holy. By St. Robert Bellarmine, great doctor of the church, brilliant mind, a Jesuit's Jesuit back in the days when they produced many saints. Let's back up a little bit with our reading because I love this quote, which I also found in the writings of Saint Teresa of Avila. This quote is from a doctor, an ancient doctor, named Antiphanes. Antiphanes. Okay. So, a doctor named Antiphanes, most skillful in his profession, asserted, as Clement of Alexandria informs us in his second book of his Pedagogus, that almost the only cause of every disease was too much food and drink. And like I said, St. Teresa of Avila quotes this, where she's trying to coax people to take on serious bodily mortification, which begins with curtailing food and drink, particularly fancy foods and so on, and trying to embrace living on that which is necessary for life and not more, and this greatly aids everything in the spiritual life. In fact, unless food is curtailed, there can be no real advancement in prayer or in the spiritual life, or if there is any advancement, it is so slow as to be almost imperceptible to yourself and to anyone else who observes you. Let's continue. So we have Antiphanes to thank for saying that almost the only cause of every disease was too much food and drink. On the other hand, St. Basil tells us that he thought abstinence might be called the parent of health, abstaining from certain things, for food particularly. And indeed, physicians in general, in order to restore health to a diseased body, almost always order their patients to abstain from meat and wine. Again, drunkenness and revelings not only injure the health of the soul and body, but also our domestic interests. How many, from being rich, have become poor? How many from masters have become servants? And all by drunkenness. This vice also deprives many poor people of the alms of the rich, for they who are not content with moderate meat and drink easily spend their whole substance upon their own pleasures, so that nothing remains for their needy brethren. Thus are the words of the apostle fulfilled, quote, "And one indeed is hungry, and another is drunk." End quote. We will now mention some remedies. The example of the saints may serve as one remedy against these sins. I omit the hermits and monks, whom St. Jerome mentions in his epistle to Eustochius, and tells her that amongst them anything cooked was a luxury. I will not dwell on St. Ambrose, who, as Paulinus mentions in his life, fasted every day except Sundays and solemn festivals. I will not speak of St. Augustine, who, as Posodius testifies, used only herbs and legumes at his table, and had meat only for strangers and guests. But if we attentively consider how the Lord of all things was himself in want, when in the desert he undertook to feed the multitude, we shall doubtless soon acquire sobriety. God, who alone is powerful, alone wise, alone bountiful, and who could and who wished to provide in the best manner possible for his beloved people, for 40 years rained down upon them only manna, and gave them water from a rock. Manna was food, not much differing from flour mixed with honey, as we are told in the book of Exodus. Behold, how moderately our most wise God fed and nourished his people. Their food, cake, their drink, water, and yet all continue to enjoy good health until they began to long after flesh. Jesus Christ, the Son of God, after the example of his Father, in whom are hid all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge, when he feasted so many thousands of the people, placed before them only a few loaves and fishes, and water for drink. And not only when our Savior was yet in the world did he give his hearers such a repast, but after his resurrection also, when all power had been given unto him in heaven and on earth, meeting his disciples on the seashore, he feasted them on bread and fish alone, and this very frugally. Oh, how different are the ways of God from the ways of men! Exclamation point. The King of heaven and earth rejoices in simplicity and sobriety. Rejoices in simplicity and sobriety. Rejoices. And is chiefly solicitous to fill, enrich, and exhilarate the soul. But men prefer listening to their concupiscence and their enemy the devil before God. Thus we may say with the apostle that the God of carnal men is, quote unquote, their belly. The sense of touch comes next, which of all the senses is the most lively and fleshy, by which many sins enter to defile our own soul, as well as the souls of others, such as the works of the flesh, which St. Paul enumerates when he says, quote, "Now, the works of the flesh are manifest," which means obvious, which are fornication, uncleanness, immodesty, etc. By these 3 words, the apostle includes all kinds of impurities: fornication, uncleanness, immodesty. Nor is there any necessity to dwell more at length on these sins, which the faithful ought rather to be ignorant of, and the names of which ought never to be heard amongst them. Thus does St. Paul speak in his epistle to the Ephesians, quote, But fornication and all uncleanness, let it not be so much as named amongst you, as becometh saints. Against all these crimes, the following seem to me to be the remedies, and they are such as physicians use to cure the sick. First, they begin with fasting or abstinence. Remedies, remedies, remedies. First, they begin with fasting or abstinence. They forbid the patients meat and wine. So must every one do the same who is given to luxury. He must abstain from eating and drinking too much. This the apostle prescribes to Timothy. Quote, use a little wine for thy stomach's sake and thy frequent infirmities. 1 Timothy 5:23. That is, use wine on the account of the weakness of your stomach, but only moderately to avoid drunkenness, for in much wine is luxury. Again, physicians give bitter medicine, bleed the body, make incisions, and do other things painful to nature. So did the saints say with the apostle, quote, but I chastise my body and bring it into subjection, lest perhaps, when I have preached to others, I myself should become a castaway. 1 Corinthians 9:27. Hence, the ancient hermits and anchorites led a life quite opposed to the pleasures and delights of the flesh, in fastings and watchings, lying on the ground in sackcloth and chastisements. And this they did, not so much through hatred of their body, as to the concupiscences of their flesh. I will mention one example out of many. St. Jerome mentions in the life of St. Hilarion that when he felt himself tempted by impure thoughts, he thus addressed his body, quote, I will not let you kick, nor will I feed you with corn, but with chaff. I will tame you by hunger and thirst. I will load you with heavy weights and accustom you to heat and cold, so that you shall think more of food than of pleasure. End quote. Again, in order to exercise the body, physicians prescribed walking, playing at ball, or any other like exercise. So also, in order to preserve the health of the soul, we ought, if truly desirous of our salvation, to spend some time every day in meditating on the mysteries of our redemption, or the four last things, death, judgment, heaven, and hell, or some other pious subjects. And if we cannot of ourselves furnish subjects for meditation, we should spend some time in reading the Holy Scriptures, the lives of the saints, or some other good book. And I have mentioned a number of good books. The Secret of the Rosary, Introduction to the Devout Life, Life of the Curé of Ars, St. John Vianney, and of course this one, Live Well, Die Holy, by St. Robert Bellarmine. Now that we've reached 15 minutes, we'll close this reading wanting to keep them short. Thank you for your participation. I pray that it may bless you, and that in your prayers I humbly ask you to bless me. Thank you, and God bless you.